Welcome to Writer's Digest Presents. Hosted by the editors of Writer's Digest, this monthly podcast features conversations with writing and publishing experts whose insights will help ignite your creative vision, hone your skills, build your platform, and get your work out into the world. Welcome back to Writer's Digest Presents. I'm Editor-in-Chief Amy Jones, here with Senior Editor Robert Lee Brewer, Managing Editor Moriah Richard, and Editor Michael Woodson. For the WD team, March marks the beginning of spring, beginning new life after a very cold winter. That's why we decided to focus on debut authors for this episode. They're the writers who are venturing into a new part of their writing life. After a chat among the editors of WD, Moriah will facilitate a roundtable discussion with three incredible debut authors that we've recently featured in our Breaking In column. But before that, we would like to chat a little bit about debut authors and books we love. Hey, everyone.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi.
It's nice and cold here, even though we're this episode airs in March. We're in the middle of a nice ice storm, so I have little ice balls hitting my window. Hope no one can hear it.
Same.
Mm-hmm. Well, so as we talk about debut books, I guess my first question is, do you all read a lot of debut authors and debut books?
I love actually reading debut books. I made like a habit of doing it a couple years ago. If a book was coming out that I really was interested in, and it wasn't the author's first book, I would go and read their first book first, or whatever, like in order as much as I could. Mm-hmm. And I just loved watching like their career in that way, and like following it as best I could in that way. And then that sort of catapulted me into just like looking for debut novels as often as I could.
Oh, that's really interesting. It's funny. I think when I will see a book that I think looks interesting, and I will pick it up and I will read it. And if it is not their first book, but I love it, then I will go back and start at the beginning and read all of the way through. But I've also been actively trying to read more debut authors in the past, I would say 5 or 6 years. It used to not be a thing I would pay any attention to, but now I love finding debut books that just kind of astound me and don't feel like they're debut books. Right. And there are so many like that right now. It feels like we're in a really great era for a debut novelist in particular, which is like my interest.
I don't seek out debuts. I tend to just read books that I have a lot of friends who really know the things that I like to read, and they will send things to me. Hey, you got to check this out. This seems like something you would really enjoy. And I never really paid attention to whether or not, as a reader, what I was picking up was a debut. But I would, if I really liked something I read, I would go and see if they'd written anything else. And if they hadn't, I always put a little mental note on their name to just keep an eye out, because I know if I loved your first book that much, whatever's coming next, I automatically want to read that.
Yeah, and I think that's how I used to read, was more of like discovering the author, and then once I discovered the author that I really liked, like just diving into that author's entire body of work and reading everything that they've written that I can find. And now it's more, I don't know if this is just age or just for anyone who doesn't know, I've got 5 kids. That kind of takes up some time. So like now it's more things really have to be like kind of referred to me. And then I find myself, especially since the pandemic, rereading things more frequently, and kind of getting that comfort read where it's less about discovery at the moment. It's just like, I want something to sit down with that I know I like and I know I've been to before, and re-experiencing it. And as I'm starting to break out of the pandemic, I do find myself thinking, I want to start finding these new voices. And, even with my own writing, like, find that I'm starting to break loose a little bit, and wanting to take some more risks with my writing that maybe over the past like year or two, it's just been more like keep my head above water type stuff.
So you mentioned books have to be like referred to you because you're very busy, and Moriah also mentioned that friends recommend books. What are some of the other ways that you find or seek out debut authors?
Okay, I'll go first. For me, it's as I mentioned with the kids, like, we all, the bookstores get excited when they see us roll up to the bookstore, because we will all just go to our different areas of the bookstore and just start browsing, and we always walk away with plenty of stuff. So even though we've got way more than enough books to last us, if we were ever to get snowed in for like an entire year, we would, with no electricity, we'd still be able to entertain ourselves with everything we can read. Just browsing for us definitely works. But referrals are always nice and appreciated, and thankfully we have lots of reader friends to keep those going.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I like to, I have a few book bloggers that I follow pretty seriously, and I always like the things that they recommend, so I always keep tabs on what they're reading. But another avenue that I've discovered fairly recently, I'm still pretty new to Twitter. I think I've only had it about like a year now, but I have started to follow my favorite authors on social media, and many of them talk about books that are coming out that they're excited about. So I have found so many debut authors that way, just because, again, it's if I love what you write and this is what you love to read, I'm probably going to love it as well. So I always like to give those ones a try.
I get a lot of mine from social too, Moriah, and a lot of it's from like sort of Bookstagram influencers, what they're reading, and a lot of times what happens though is that all of them are all reading like the same one book because it's very popular at the moment. So then I'll go and see like on Goodreads or Bookshop like related titles and what other people are reading who also read that, which helps. But Robert, to your point, I love going to the bookstore and just like letting them lead me to something and what they're interested in too is a really fun way to find a new book.
Yeah, and I should also mention all of us have this really cool job where we interact with writers a lot and publicists a lot, and I would be remiss to not mention that I've got a long list of things that I want to read just through that, and the different author spotlights that we have, and any time that I'm going through and editing those different interviews, and I'm just always amazed at all the great work that's coming out from authors who've been around for a while, but also all the debut authors that come across our desks.
Yeah, and how, I think, Amy, you said this at the beginning, but like how unique all of them are still. Like every time, Robert, when I'm also doing a spotlight, I read the synopsis and I'm just like, how did they think of this? Like, there are so many good ideas that are still being written and like chances taken on them by being published. It's really exciting.
It is. You're right, Robert. The author spotlights on our website are that's how I hear about some of the debut books too. One of my other favorite places to learn about debut authors is Book of the Month Club. I joined that a few years ago, and there was a book that I was interested in. I had heard about it somewhere, and it was going to be an early release on Book of the Month clubs, but only if you were a member. So I signed up so that I could, and this was before working at Writer's Digest. So I was really excited about the idea of getting a book early. And so I signed up, and it's been years. I haven't been able to cancel my membership because they consistently make an effort at spotlighting and including debut authors in their picks, whether it's a main Book of the Month pick or if it's one of the add-ons that you can pop in your box as a little bonus read. But they do a really great job of picking debuts that are, a lot of them I haven't heard of, by way of my job, which is kind of exciting because it's a whole other collection of books that I hadn't heard about otherwise.
Amy, do you remember what the book was?
It was called Golden Child by Claire Adam. Yeah, and it was like you said, Michael, just a concept, an idea that I hadn't heard of before, and it seemed really interesting, and I was very excited to get my hands on it. And it was by an imprint whose books I also really liked. So I knew that they, it would be in the vein of something that I would enjoy.
Yeah, so I do this with poetry a lot, but with like fiction and nonfiction, do any of you, Amy just mentioned it, do any of you like kind of follow certain presses that are like your favorite kind of press? I know I used to do that with music all the time. There'd be like a record label that anything came out from there, I would just sometimes buy it without even hearing the band because I would be like, I trust them to curate good artists.
I have a subscription to Locus magazine. So they do a lot of like horror, sci-fi, fantasy, and they always have really great articles by authors that are familiar to me and who I love. And then I also pretty closely follow Tor, and they have a free newsletter that I get sent to me that I can always like keep an eye on it. And generally, if something's getting a lot of attention, it'll appear in many of the newsletters that I follow. And then I'm like, well, that one's going to go on the want to read list on Goodreads.
I'm subscribed to Electric Lit, and they have a lot of, so many of their short stories are so compelling that I will go and just see if that author has anything else going on, short story or novels. But I just love Tin House, and Coffee House Press. A book that I will mention later is from Coffee House Press that was just like, it blew my mind. It was one of the coolest books I'd ever read.
Cool.
So we've kind of strayed away from the debut topic, but since we're talking about books that we like and imprints that we like, what are some debut books or authors that just absolutely blew you away, where you were just sort of stunned to learn that it was a debut if you didn't know it before? I have two that come to mind immediately.
Well, then you go.
Okay. One is...
you're a co-host, right?
I know. Not just the question asker. I really loved The Prophets by Robert
Okay, thank
Jones
God you're
Jr.
saying this, because if you weren't going to say this, it was going to be one of mine.
I thought maybe it would be. Because I feel like we talked about it before, about how much we loved it. Yeah. To the point where I emailed his publicist to tell her how much I loved the book, and like, if he ever wants to write anything for Writer's Digest, please let me know, because I will read anything that he writes. But I was stunned to learn that it was a debut. It was one of those books where the writing, like, just at a sentence level, even beyond the story, the sentence sentences were so beautiful. I remember it was spring or summer, and I was sitting out on my front porch on the swing reading, and I would just stop and reread sentences over and over again because they were gorgeous. They were beautifully written sentences, and they, the book covers some challenging topics, so it's not necessarily a feel-good book, but my goodness, was it beautiful.
Have Robert or Moriah, have either of you read it? Sorry, not to put you on.
I have not
blast here,
but
just curious.
When this episode and some of the questions were put out there, I was thinking, I wish I'd read that Prophets book, because everyone talks about the Prophets book being so good and such an exceptional debut. So I haven't read it, but it's definitely on that list, short list of books that I want to read.
I'm in the same boat as Robert, where this book has been on my list since our author spotlight. But it's just one of those things where the list grows and grows and grows.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I only have so much time in a day. So I am definitely going to get there, and I'm excited to read it, but I just haven't done it yet.
It's one of those things too. Amy, you're so right. The sentences are so beautiful. And I often find a lot of times with debut novels, they do something really well. And the Prophets, I think he happens to do a lot of things really well. The writing is so good, and it's told through more perspectives than any book I've ever read. And
also true.
He nails every single perspective, and it makes something that would be really hard to digest oddly hopeful by the end without sugarcoating any of it. But yeah, highly recommend that one too.
Yeah, and I don't know how everyone else feels about this, but sometimes the debut books are the ones that, even if it's not the first book I've read by the author, sometimes are the ones that stick out to me, because it seems like there's, even if they're not as technically well written, sometimes it's almost like they've got some kind of extra layer of emotion, or a really hard to describe kind of power behind them that sometimes other books, even though they might be more perfect, thinking of it from my editorial side of the desk, they might be more perfect in certain ways, the writing, I still like the debut better, because it's this one feels like it was some kind of emotional thing to get it out there, and
totally.
And yeah, and so thinking about this question too, it made me realize how many times I kind of answering the question of the debut author caught me off guard. It really made me think about how a lot of times I am kind of coming in a book or two later in the author's trajectory, kind of like what I used to do with music. Sometimes you hear a great song and you think, man, this is great new music. And then you go back and you see the artist is 17 albums out and they just finally hit it big, Yeah. So these people that just came out of nowhere have actually been around for a long time building up their audience. Also happens with authors a lot. So it was kind of difficult for me to figure out a good answer for this. And going back to the poetry, I meant to make sure that I could pronounce this last name right, so I'm apologize in advance if I'm butchering it. But Ocean Vlong, his Night Sky with Exit Wounds poetry collection. I remember getting that a few years back, and pre-COVID, and just being blown away by this debut poet who just felt wise beyond his years, and really a huge emotional connection with his words.
Doesn't he have a new one, or does he have a new poetry collection coming out?
I believe he does, but
so.
To tell you the truth, like for me, time is always, and more so the past few years.
Yeah.
Like there are things that I think like are about to happen or just happened, and then I find out like no, they really happened a long time ago.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, gotcha. So this whatever I'm talking about could have been out already.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Awesome.
Was that your second one, Amy, or did you say you had another one?
Oh yeah, the other one I had is one that just came out maybe at the time of recording this about a month and a half ago. It was called Beasts of a Little Land by Joanna Kim, and I may have pronounced the first name wrong. I think we included her in the Breaking In column, maybe in the November-December issue. I could be wrong about that, but again, it was a book that the language was just on top of the story being so compelling. It takes place on the Korean Peninsula and covers the many wars that that nation went through until it became divided, and the language was so beautiful. Again, I would stop and reread sentences, and I have a little note in my phone of just sentences and quotes that I wrote down that I just thought were gorgeous. And sometimes I'll go back and reread them because they are universal thoughts and emotions that take me back to the book, but also I think are make me think about life and how lucky we are.
So one of mine, if Amy had mentioned it, was The Prophets. I think it's one of the best books that's been written in the last several years. And I had the pleasure of speaking with Robert Jones Jr. like a year ago now, and he was just delightful and the sweetest person. But the two books that I brought are very different from one another. The first one's called The Golden State by Lydia Kiesling, and I just love this cover so much. I don't know why. And it's about this woman who's sort of on the brink of a breakdown. And so she spontaneously sort of flees her life in San Francisco to this fictional desert of Alta Vista, California, where her grandparents left her like a mobile home with her toddler. And she's right now like a single mother. Her Turkish husband can't get back into the country. And the rest of the book is just her being there for the next 10 days and how she's like very slowly, understandably spiraling. And it's just really a beautiful character analysis and really stream of consciousness, the way it's written, just really, really long sentences and kind of mundane, like nothing's really happening, but you can tell like something very personal and internal is happening. And I love this book and I really highly recommend it. And the other one is this tiny little, weird in the best sense, like I find this to be a compliment, weird book called Temporary by Hilary Leichter. And it's just about this temp who is like jumping from job to job, looking for permanence, like in her life. But it sort of rides the line of, magical realism. I mean, it's okay. Well, I should say it's not realistic at all. Like she gets a job, like sending letters for a witch, and then she's on like a pirate ship, but it's not fantasy. It's just like magical realism because the reality, you just believe it. And it sort of in the same way, like that you were saying, Amy, there were full sentences and pages that I would just take pictures of and just go back and reread because this crazy thing is happening, but I was able to place it upon my own life in reality in really personal and intimate ways, and was just truly laughing out loud a lot. It's such a good book. And I don't know anyone who's read it, so I'm just like dying to have someone read it so I could talk about it. And also the cover. I want this as a print.
Oh yeah, that's a great cover.
It's not the coolest thing you've ever seen. Sorry, and I'm also my favorite color is pink, and there's a lot of pink on this cover.
It reminds me of some drawings from like the 1920s.
Yeah.
Sort of has that old, like the covers of books from around that time period. Moriah, what's one of yours?
Okay, so I actually have a list, and I'm gonna be brief because if you know me, I become obsessed with things that I like, and I'm talking like I will read all of the fan fiction. I will know everything you've ever put on social media. Like I become a capital F fan. But absolutely top of the list, Adam Silvera's More Happy Than Not.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that was his debut.
Yes, right? And so, I mean, I love that book to the point where, like, I'm planning to get a tattoo for it. Like,
wow.
No matter how many times I read it, always blows me away. Casey McQuiston's Red, White, and Royal Blue.
I love that one.
Yes, absolutely. Aiden Thomas's Cemetery Boys.
Oh, wow.
That one was another one that I was like, no, there's no way that this is a debut book. There's just not. Chloe Gong's These Violent Delights was another one that just felt like super powerful on every sentence. Then, of course, my favorite book of all time is The Foxhole Court by Nora Sokovic. And that is part of a trilogy, which is just like hands down the best book that I've ever read. I am the ideal reader for that book. So I think that's why it captured me so much. But the last one on my list that I really, really wanted to mention, with the caveat that I did go and get my MFA alongside of this person, David Jackson Ambrose's State of the Nation. Like, if I were to teach a class on multiple perspectives and emotionality, like that's the book that I would bring, because it has a really unique, each character that you get to see through their eyes, they each have a very distinct, unique point of view, but they're so clear. You feel like you are living inside of them and inside of their world, which was really, really awesome to see, because that book had been workshopped in a couple of different ways in our workshop classes. So I went from like seeing that in its very rough stages to then like pre-ordering the book, getting it in the mail, and reading it, and I was just absolutely blown away and so proud. So that's the last
so
one
cool.
that I'll mention. Yeah.
I love that story. Now I'm going to have to look that one up.
Oh, it's wonderful.
You listed several books that I haven't read. I'm going to have to make note of some of those.
And I'm sorry if you just said this, Moriah, but These Violent Delights has a sequel out now, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I haven't yet read the sequel because I like to play this like weird game with myself where I'm like really excited for a sequel to come out, but it's the last one in that world.
Oh.
So it's on my bedside table and I look at it and I think, I'm so excited to read you. But like knowing once I read it, it will be read. Yeah, that it'll be done. Because you can only read a book for the first time once, right?
I'm with you on this. I luxuriate in books. Like I cannot speed read. I mean, I choose not to most of the time because I'm just sad. Like especially books I love, I'm just like I don't want this to end.
And that's my spouse was just rolling his eyes because I talked about that book for months. I was like, it's coming out. I had it on the calendar. Like, here it is. It finally came. And I'm not reading it.
Yeah. I support that.
Delayed gratification. That's awesome.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Yes.
So,
Yeah.
when I'm emotionally ready for it to be over, then I will read it.
Mm-hmm.
You know what's another one, and I have to say it before we wrap up, is The Hate You Give by Angie Thomas is one of the best debuts I've ever read. Ever.
Right?
I knew there was one that on the tip of my tongue that I was like, what did I not bring?
Yes.
And it's The Hate You Give.
Absolutely.
As soon as I read that, I came to Angie Thomas late, and so when I read that one, I instantly bought the other ones that she had written in the meantime and binge read all of them in a row.
Yes. Okay. I will
and
say,
then bought them for my cousin and shipped them to her.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
I did binge The Hate You Give. I say as I like talk about luxuriating. I read it on a plane. I was like, I'm finishing this before we land.
Mm-hmm.
I did that with Concrete Rose. I started it and I was like, oh, this is a book, like, I'm going to be able to spend all week with this book. And then by the time that my spouse got home from work that night, I was like, sit down because I have to gush about a book I read today.
That reminds me of another one, The Poet X by Elizabeth Acevedo. That was another debut that I was like, you have got to be kidding me. That's a debut.
I actually can't believe that.
I mean, I know she had written other things
it's because
before, but
we talk about this all the time. Like, because it's their debut doesn't mean it's the first time they've ever written either.
Exactly.
So it's like, I guess I shouldn't be shocked. These are talented writers, who aren't like just like, oh, I guess I'll try and get a debut. Right. They've been working at it.
Right. For years and years in a lot of cases.
Yeah. So many of them, especially the ones who are great at writing those sentences that we love, come at novel writing after kind of building a small career around short story writing. I know so many debut authors that were trying to get a collection of short stories published, found an agent for the short story collection, and they would only get published if they agreed to also write a novel to go with that short story collection. So a lot of times, like it's kind of like with the music, like even when we're getting a debut author, we're not really getting a debut author because these people,
right?
Like all of us writers, like write for a long, long time. So that's what we love.
That's a really great point, Robert. Yeah. But in some cases, it is their first time having a full book published, and that comes with its own challenges. And since we all have worked with debut writers in some way, shape, or form, I wondered if any of you have any advice based on, looking at it from an editor's perspective in some cases, or in our cases, like, what are things that you've seen debut authors do that you've worked with that have created some words of wisdom that you might share with any of them, with new ones? The one that I will say that I gave to the authors that I worked with who were writing their first book was don't look at the reviews. Like, don't go on Goodreads and look at the reviews, please. If there's one thing that you don't do, let it be that.
Yeah, that's great advice. Even if you have experience like with workshopping your writing, one bad review can really ruin you and make you overlook all the great stuff you're getting, because it's like human nature to think of, like, to try to change the mind of that one person who just doesn't get it, and they're never going to get it, and there's nothing you can do about that. And I don't know if this is kind of related, but one thing for debut authors is, like, don't hide your enthusiasm about your writing and what you love. Like, don't feel like you have to try to act like you've been there or that you're like too cool or anything. My favorite debut authors that I work with as an editor are the ones who are coming in and they're just excited and they can't hide it, and that kind of enthusiasm is infectious for the writer, but also for me as an editor, and I want to share that enthusiasm with people as well. And I think it goes through to, like, literary agents, publicists, everyone starts to feel that vibe. So don't try to act like you're too cool for school. If you're really, like, an excitable person and you're excited about it, like, let it come out. You don't have to hide it.
I love that.
I think going off of that, as I think everyone here knows, in my previous editorial life, I was a book coach and an editor for a self-help publisher, and I have worked with over 100 debut authors. So I feel like I've been around the debut block a couple of times. But my thing with reviews is always keep your ideal reader in mind, because yes, we want everyone to read our work and love it, right? But you should only be writing for the one person who you know is the inspiration, the spark, the fire behind why you do this. And because, I mean, if we all love writing, but like if we were just writing for ourselves, we wouldn't ever let anybody see our work, right? So you are writing for an audience, but that audience should be like this imaginary person who is just sitting at their desk waiting for you to tell the story that they need to hear. So all of those negative reviews, none of them are your ideal reader. And they're entitled to their opinion, but you didn't write for them. Your ideal reader is going to find your work, and they're going to be totally in love with you and cheer you on. And then the other, coming like more from the editorial side, I always used to tell my authors, you know, don't be afraid to speak up at any point in this process, because your team is on your side. I know sometimes, especially as you get further along in the process and it becomes very emotional, like you might not think that you're going to have a 3 a.m. breakdown about a comma on page 97, and here we are. And so when you get there, just remember that your team is not the enemy. They want to hear what you have to say. They want to be there to help you and support you in any way that they can, even if that's like, talk me off the ledge about this comma, or if it's, you know, I'm really feeling like the story is going in a direction that I don't want it to go in. This is not the story I wanted to write. And if they're not behind you, you'll know it, and you'll be able to take steps to get a team who's going to support you and your work correctly.
Yeah, that's fantastic advice. All of that.
Thanks. Thank you.
Yeah, I guess something that I think about a lot for like especially when they're in the writing process, is that a lot of times the writing advice writers get from other writers is write every day and make it a habit and build it in. And that is smart, helpful advice, a lot of times coming from people who have already found success. And it's hard for a lot of people who want to write to find 2 hours a day, an hour a day, 30 minutes a day to write for whatever reason. If they have families, if they are working shifts that are not traditional, and that can lead to people feeling like failures, or they're not real writers, quote unquote. And for me, it's just, don't worry about that. Find the structure that works for you. And if it's a word a day, if it's a sentence a day, if it's a paragraph a week, you are being a writer, and you are doing it successfully because it makes sense for your life. And because I just feel like a lot of writers put themselves down and stop trying because of what it's supposed to look like to be a writer. And so if you're writing, you're a writer.
Yeah, and that's great advice, and like kind of loops in with the whole enthusiasm thing, and what I always try to focus on with my own writing, and also like prompting other people to write, is, you know, try to find, like, even if you're not writing material that would be considered quote unquote fun, try to make it fun for yourself and something enjoyable, and not something where you feel like you're having to work at it. Like, you know, even though like writing can be something where you're like working at it, like try to find that part of it that's the reason why you do it, because nobody's really forcing anyone to write. You know, so try to figure that out, and always keep that like kind of as like your North Star when you're writing. Like you start to feel overwhelmed, or you start to feel like, oh, I did read a bad review, now what am I going to do? Just try to like bring it back in and think like, why am I doing this? Where's the fun? And like go back to that and keep that focus.
That's perfect. I love all of these pieces of advice. It's a very uplifting note to end on. Stay tuned for Moriah's roundtable with Breaking In debut authors.
Hi everyone, this is Moriah Richard here with 3 absolutely amazing debut authors, Nita Prose, Christopher Griffin, and Maisie Eddings, for our first Breaking In discussion roundtable. As you might know, our Breaking In column in the magazine is a space where we feature some debut authors that we're super excited about. Each of our authors here today have been featured in the column, but our goal is to go a little deeper into what the process of publishing your first book is like. So welcome Nita, Christopher, and Maisie, and thank you guys so much for taking the time to be here today. So in my experience, it's always a lot more fun to have authors tell us in their own words about who they are and what their projects are. So rather than read a blurb, why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourselves? Nita, why don't you start?
Sure. Well, I'm Nita Prose, and I'm the author of The Maid. And The Maid features Molly, who is a socially awkward hotel room maid whose world gets turned upside down when she stumbles across an infamous guest who's very dead in his hotel room bed. And, you know, I think this is a book about what it means to be the same as everyone else and yet entirely different. And as a whodunit, it's maybe a little bit different too, because the mystery can only be solved through a connection to the human heart.
And I'm Maisie Eddings. I'm the author of A Brush with Love. It's a rom-com coming out with St. Martin's Press. It's about 2 dental students who trade fillings for feelings as they navigate life and kind of like the messiness of technically being an adult and not knowing what that means. And one of the big aspects of it is Harper, the heroine, is neurodiverse, which I wrote from my own perspective with that. And then it also looks at like anxiety disorders and mental illness and kind of loving yourself and learning to love somebody, learning to love somebody else as well and let them in and things like that. But yeah, it was really fun. A lot of oral puns were just like there for the taking with it. And yeah.
Hi, everyone. So interesting hearing about your books. I have like questions I want to know. But my name is Christopher Griffin, and I'm the author of You Grow Girl, Plant Queen's Lush Guide to Grow in Your Garden. And it is a fun, quirky, fashionable take on a gardening book filled with a lot of Black, queer, and non-binary joy. And storytelling, fun tutorials, and basically an extension of my social media presence. Folks can follow me at Plant Queen on Instagram. And yeah, just kind of filled the pages with lushness, iridescent vibe, and green girls galore.
Perfect. Thank you all so much, because that was way more fun than if I was just sitting here reading off of my screen about you. But now let's dive into the juicy behind the scenes kind of stuff. So for my first question today, was there something about this book that made you think, this is the project that I've got to get published?
Well, for me, it's Nita. I have to say that, my day job is as an editor. So I work in books all day long and have for many, many years. And I love my work. So it was not my plan to write a debut novel. It just kind of happened to me. So, I got an idea in my head that was like almost too good to refuse. So it happened to me in London in 2019, and I was at the London Book Fair for work, and I was staying at a London area hotel. I stepped out of the hotel and I returned to my room, and I completely startled the roommate who was cleaning it. And I remember her sort of jumping back into a shadowy corner, and she had in her hands my track pants, which like a fool I left in a tangled mess on my bed. And I looked at her and I thought, it's such an invisible and intimate job to be a roommate. You know, she cleaned my room every day. She'd been doing this for days, so she knew so much about me, and I knew nothing about her. And you know how sometimes like just a little thing like that will just sort of lodge in your head. So a few days later, I'm on my plane ride home, and then I started to hear my protagonist, the maid's voice. Her name is Molly, and it was very clean and crisp and precise. And I grabbed a napkin from under my drink, and I started to write the prologue for the book in a single burst. And that's actually how I began my debut novel. Not because I, thought, yep, now's the time. I'm going to sit down. It's January 2nd, and I'm going to begin my debut. No, it didn't happen that way for me, although for some people it does.
That's super cool. I always love hearing when people like start writing their books like on napkins or little scraps of paper and stuff like that. Like that just, I think that's the coolest thing. With A Brush with Love, I was having just very much like a quarter life crisis. I was, I'm in dental school, and I started at my first year of dental school. I think it was January 2019. And yeah, I was just really depressed. I was really anxious. I didn't know what I was doing with my life, and I felt like a lot of dissatisfaction. And one thing that was and always has been a huge balm for, anxiety and stuff like that is romance novels. And I was just consuming them just at a ridiculous pace and everything. And the one thing that I was noticing and stuff was I just didn't see a lot of neurodiverse main characters. And so I kind of wanted to see people reflective of my life and the way my brain works, in characters and things like that. And, this was right around the time Helen Wong was publishing the Kiss Quotient and stuff like that. And she's done so much to really bring neurodiverse voices to the table and everything. But, at that point I wasn't seeing it as much. And so I just kind of started writing about an anxious girl, making her way through life. And and it just ended up being really fun, I thought. And then I also was doing this thing where Barnes & Noble was doing ask us for a book rec thing. And I it was on Instagram, and I was like, oh, do you have any books set in dental school or the world of dentistry? And they DM'd me, and they were like, nobody on our team could think of a single one. And so I was like, well, maybe there's a market. Dentistry's not really sexy. Everybody hates the dentist, but let's see what we can do, the impossible. But yeah.
I love listening to your stories. The whole publishing process was one I was not expecting, to be completely honest. So I currently reside in Brooklyn. I have over 200 plants in my apartment. And I'll give y'all a little tour a little later. But I have over 200 plants in my apartment. I work full time at NYU as the assistant director for the LGBTQ plus center. And I just kind of share my journey on Instagram. And it kind of just opened up, the power of social media. It opened up doors for me. And actually my publisher reached out to me and proposed that I write a book. And I was like, okay, this is interesting. And there's a quote by Toni Morrison. It says that if you want to read a book that hasn't, if there's a book you want to read and it hasn't been written yet, then you must write it. And so I thought, well, you know what? I really do enjoy writing. I do treat Instagram like my little digital diary. So I was like, I can write. Why not bring it onto some pages? And so took 4 months in the winter of 2020. And this was pre-vaccine, all those things. To write and photograph the book. So it has a bunch of wonderful images and featuring a lot of my favorite plant shops in Brooklyn. It was a journey. Didn't realize how much I would enjoy the process. Didn't realize how tedious the process was going to be. I was not prepared, y'all. I was not prepared. Yeah, I thought I handed in my transcript at the beginning of, oh my God, was the beginning of this year? Yeah, beginning of this year. And I was like, I'm done. Bam, wrote a book. Ha! Send it to the presses. Send it to the presses. Child, if that wasn't the case, yeah, and so it's been like a year of, earlier, submitted my transcript earlier, 2021. Spent that entire year finalizing just design choices, cover, all those things. And now finally it is ready to be printed, and it comes out on March 22nd, a day before my 33rd birthday. Very intentional about that. But yeah, it was a process that I was not expecting during that time, but one that I gladly strutted into with a sense of curiosity and wanting to learn. So
what kind of camera did you have to use to take all the photos? Like, do you shoot on an iPhone or?
Ooh, child, no. I hired one of my good friends, a photographer, to shoot everything. But we shot a lot of it in my apartment. And so I have a very intentional vision of how I want things to look. And so was kind of like with her, like, hey, this is how I want to lay this out. And I think there are over just close to 200 images in the book. And so we had to like go through, visit the shop, go through tutorials. And it was a process. I can find that information out later, maybe what camera was used, but it was a process.
So at Writer's Digest, we always get a ton of questions from writers about how you go about getting an agent. But what I'm really curious about is, how did you know that your agent was the right choice for you and your project?
Well, for me, that was really clear. Because I work with books all day, I know a lot of the agents. And for me, something that was really important was having an agent who really understood the spirit of uplit. So uplit, as they call it in the UK, or feel-good fiction in the US, is a kind of genre that is really led by the heart and a journey of the spirit. And while my novel is at its heart a whodunit, it is, a mystery. Somebody dies at the beginning, and it is about a quest to find out who did it. It is also, melding the whodunit with a journey of the spirit, with uplit. So for me, my agent, the agent that I wanted most was Madeline Milburn. And that is because she was the person who isolated way before the rest of us knew it or were introduced to it. A little book called Eleanor Oliphant is Completely Fine. A beautiful piece of work by Gail Honeyman. It's a book that really shifted a lot of paradigms, I think, in the publishing industry. And for me as an editor and as a reader, the commitment to the point of view and to that genre, dealing with the dark through the lens of light, was something I found just so utterly appealing. So having an agent who really truly understood it in her heart, in her mind, and how she approached the project was really important to me. And so I was also terrified to submit my work, absolutely terrified, because, it wasn't like I could then walk away. I had to work in the industry. I would have to face agents after they said, no, your work is really lovely, but I don't want it. So, it took me a while to actually work up the courage to send it. And I was so overjoyed when Madeline Milburn agreed to represent me. So that was sort of my journey and my rationale.
I love that. My journey was a little different. So the publisher reached out first before I could secure an agent. So I'm sure y'all can imagine me navigating that process without an agent was very interesting. And I learned some things after I got an agent. I know better next time. Love my publisher. But it is important for any folks who are listening or are trying to get their book published. Make sure you have your support system. And an agent can be really, really helpful to engage in those conversations that you don't want to bother yourself with. So did the deal, and then my agent found me, and she's a part of the team at CAA, Cindy. And for me, I think it's all about personality. It's about whether they are. I think it's also about the connection in terms of wanting to learn who I am as a person, right? So as a Black, queer, non-binary person, there's a lot of intricacies to who I am, and the ways that I navigate the world. And Cindy we just connected on that in so many different levels. She really saw me for who I was as a person, understood my mission, my vision, and really just wanted to support it with, like, I don't know if we can curse on here, but like badass energy. Like, she just had that badass energy, and I was like, Cindy, please, let's work together. And so it was really amazing being able to for her to find me. She found me and introduced me to the entire team at CAA. And we've been working together across multiple projects, and I wouldn't have it any different because they're such a supportive team, and they really listen, which I think is just so, so important. Yeah.
My like journey has been a little weird, but a lot of like my motivations were kind of in a similar vein. Like, I was looking for somebody that would be really supportive of, like, you know, so I'm autistic, I have ADHD, like all these different neurodiversities that kind of influence how I interact with people and just like how I approach stories and writing in general and stuff. So the clearing process was really nerve-wracking for me. And you know what I think is so funny, and I totally like get this and respect it. I have a lot of agents turn the book down because of dental phobia. And like, I so like understand that, because it's like, I get it. Like, being afraid of the dentist, like, that is an occupational hazard. I understand why people don't like dentists. But so I was like, oh God, like, there must be just no market for this at first. And then I came across Kelly Martin, who was working with Wendy Sherman and Associates. And I read a couple blog posts that she wrote. And like, she just had thought so. I just loved like the eloquence and like the perspective she had on love stories and what kind of like the romance genre is doing and how it's transforming and things like that. And so I queried her. I was super excited. And we ended up connecting. And I mean, like, we would just go back and forth, like fangirling with each other. Like, you know, it was just one of those people where like, I adore Kelly. She has since moved to a different role in publishing. And so I then was like at a position where I had to figure out like who to work with and like, you know, who I was going to be represented by and everything. And Courtney Miller Callahan at Handspun Lit, who I just have really admired. I admire her client list, but she's also done like so much advocacy and good work for just trying to make publishing a better place and a more like equitable place, and, you know, getting stories the coverage and like the spot at the table that they deserve and stuff like that. And so I was really excited to work with somebody, or wanted to work with somebody that had that intentionality behind what they were doing and stuff. And so I queried her, and we really connected. And so she represents me now, but I feel very lucky to have worked with both Kelly and Courtney thus far. So yeah, it's been weird though. It's been like so stressful. It's that part is like so stressful.
It's interesting, like, what before you're in it, you never know like what is gonna be the biggest stressor or not. So it's one of those things you're just constantly learning as you go.
And there's constantly new stressors too. Like every day you find out a new thing. I'm like, oh, I didn't know I could be like stressed about this today. Like, here we go.
And as somebody who has worked with a lot of debut authors, as an editor and a book coach, I have come to expect like the weirdest things, like on page 294, I found like a comma out of place will just like become a huge deal. And if you had asked that person the week before what's gonna, bring all these emotions to the surface, that would not have been on the list. But it's every day it's something different, I think.
Every day there's like a new tripwire that will be like, this is going to be the disaster. Speaking of agents, my poor agent, because I email her with like new little rambling panics every day. I'm just like, I don't know. Yeah. Publishing's stressful. I was surprised.
Well, kind of along that vein, if you could go back in time and tell yourself one thing that you would need to prepare for when it comes to either the editing or the publication process, what would that one thing be?
I'll go first. Honestly, I don't think I would tell myself anything because I probably would freak myself out. I think I would freak myself out. Yeah, I think it was important for me. And, I work in education, so like I get the general, well, for me in my writing, it was very, like doing research and finding information and making it accessible and fun and user friendly and engaging. So like that was easy for me. But yeah, I mean, I think I did everything I needed to do. Because I think throughout this journey, and my plants have been a real big part of that. And that, caring for them has been a mirror to how I care for myself, right? So I've been like really spending a lot of time with myself. I'm pre-pandemic, I was, just like an extroverted, social, like get my energy from other people. And obviously, we can't do that in the same ways that we used to. And so I turned inward, and my plants really helped me, were just a reflective aspect of my life that helped me dig a little deeper into myself. And so I think it was perfect timing to write a book. If there was any time to write a book, I would have never thought it would have been, those 4 months. But it was actually the perfect time because I was inside spending a lot of time with my plants, and I was able to really just dig deep and explore some things that I was curious about. I wrote a chapter on water and was like really curious, like, where is this water coming from? What's the difference between spring water, tap water, bottled water? And how does it impact the plants? But then I was like, well, goodness gracious, I'm drinking this too. Wait a minute now. I gotta make some different choices. And so it was like, I was having such a good time with myself because I'm like writing the book, but then I'm also finding out all these new things. So I was like, oh my God, I can use this for myself. So yeah, I think I did what needed to be done in that moment in time. And so past Christopher would have to just be resilient and work on it in the ways that I was able to, because I would freak myself out if I went back and said, Christopher girl, here's everything you got to prepare for. Just being honest.
Yeah, I'm with you, Christopher. It's better not to know, because I do think there's so much to do as a writer. Every given day is like a new set of challenges and hurdles that it's actually better not knowing what you're going to get into. Now, I'm saying that to a podcast where a lot of people are wanting to get into this, and I'm telling you, don't look too deep. It's going to be okay. Yes. It will. But do it a day at a time. Take the day at a time approach, like Christopher's saying, and you'll get to where you're going to go. But without, ending in an anxiety attack before you've even started.
I wouldn't warn myself because I think I would have been too afraid to like go forward with it and stuff. I think I wish I had a better okay, so bear with me here because I'm gonna speak in figurative language and allegories and metaphors. But I've recently developed this new way of kind of thinking about things, because I think what I didn't realize, especially as you get closer to the pub date and everything like that, you just are subjected to a lot more reviews and being tagged in negative ones, or, you know, subtweets, or like any kinds of things like that, where it's like other people's opinions and like readers' opinions, which I like completely, you know, readers have whatever opinion they want to have and they can hate it, and that's totally their prerogative. But sometimes seeing that, even if it's on accident, it's hard not to internalize that, right? Or like create a lot of doubt. And so I've been like trying to think about it, like my brain, and Christopher, I'm not like just BSing here, but like I think about my brain as like a garden, right? And so like these negative ideas could be like little weeds that are being planted and things like that. And like every morning I have to wake up and I have to basically like pluck the weeds out. I have to water the things that are important. And like, I wish I had that mindset like this entire time, because I think I would have like internalized and doubted stuff a lot less at certain aspects, but I definitely would not want to know some of like the stressors and stuff like that. So yeah, I wouldn't want spoilers for like past me. I would just want like a better brain garden. So
it's a lovely metaphor. It's perfect. And I think that is something about being an author, is that once your book is finished, once it's published, it's not just yours anymore. In fact, it's barely yours. It's everyone else's. And that shift from you being alone with the page and the word to it being everyone else's it's a real reckoning moment. And you do, as Maisie is saying, have to, you know, get ready for the feedbacks. You know, much of it is going to be good and that will buoy you, but you know, it's important to categorize the rest of the feedback into helpful versus not helpful. You know, something that I have to remind myself of when I'm weeding the garden is that my book isn't for everybody. It's going to please who it's going to please. And I wrote it for the people with who I had in mind it would please them. But, you know, a really hardcore mystery lover, or, you know, a hardcore legal thriller lover, well, you know, if they're really dedicated to only those genres, they're going to have a hard time finding something to love in my book. And I've had to remind myself that, you know, well, that's okay. Those readers, there's lots of other wonderful authors out there who will serve their taste better. And I think that is the beautiful democracy of the reading world, is that we all are in this ecosystem, in this garden together as writers. And together we create all of these different sorts of plants, to use Christopher's
Come on, garden metaphors. Here for all of it.
And, you know, you get to choose the flower from the garden. So you choose what you're going to like. Don't choose, you know, the thorn that you don't like. Choose what you love.
And I think it's also important that, because I think folks can get stuck in, you know, is this good enough for other people to see? I think that's like one of the leading causes of like procrastination for a lot of artists that want to bring something into the world. And I think honestly, because I did have that thought too. And also, like, I do not have I consider myself, I don't like using the word expert. Like, I'm just a garden guru. Like, I'm good at tending to my garden, and I'm going to share things that have been helpful for me that could be helpful for you. And I think for me, it was really asking myself, is this something that I love? Did I chuckle when I read this? If I chuckled, then I'm like, good, it's good enough for me. So there we go, put it out into the world. So I think, you know, as long as you love what you're creating, and obviously, you know, you're part of it, you're creating it for yourself, right? And I think that's what we forget. We're always thinking of other people. So like, if you love it and it feels good for you, then let that love liberate you. So that you can, you know, release your magic out into the world, and don't forget that love that you initially had, because it can be, I think, watered down with criticisms and critiques and feedback. But think back to that moment when you sat down and wrote that chapter or wrote that sentence. And if you loved it, then that's all that matters.
And I think that's so crucial too for like subsequent works and stuff, because like second book syndrome, third book syndrome, like that's you know, because then you feel like as you enter those next projects and stuff, like I don't know, it leaves like that space where it feels like just you and the page initially, and like you feel like somebody's reading over your shoulder. So just like shooing them out the door and focusing on that is so important.
Well, I love everything that has been said. And I know that the question initially was like, no, the answers were like, no, we don't want to know anything. This is terrifying, which I definitely understand, having worked with, I worked with over 100 debut authors in my last job. But one memory that I have that's like very visceral to me as an editor was there was this one project, and it was like anything that could go wrong was going wrong. And it was like just triage 24/7 with this author. And then we had this one day where we got 3 different options for her cover. And so we jumped on a call together, and we're going over these options, and, you know, she's stressed, she's worn down, and she just looked at the computer, and then she looked at me and she said, "This is really happening, isn't it? Like, I'm really publishing a book." And I was like, "Yes, you are." And so I learned to like take that small joy when it came. And I want to know, was there ever a moment like that for you where you were just kind of like, wow, I'm really publishing this thing, aren't I?
Mine actually just happened. I mean, there's been small moments like that along the way, but I think the most recent, I got my author copies on Friday night. Yeah. And I had, so my apartment, I'm on the 3rd floor of this walk up, and like, I swear if Tim Burton designed like a claymation staircase, it would be this staircase. Like, it is the staircase from hell. But so I'm like lugging like this box up, and I'm like tripping, and it's heavy and everything like that. And I was just like, I was so excited, and I came in, I busted up my cat. My goodness. Sorry, my cat's like all over the place. But I like busted open the box, and it was just like, I don't even know how to explain the feeling that it was pretty amazing, and it was so special, and like it really hit me like this is a final book. I've like put so much of my heart and soul into it, and I just felt so like overwhelmed with love and excitement for it and everything like that. So that was like a really special moment.
I think I've had multiple of those moments. I think the first one was, and each one had like a different emotional significance for me. I think the first one was like when I submitted the transcript. I was like, it's out. Damn, y'all have it. I can't really make any changes, even though some changes would come. But in my mind, that was it. I was like, y'all got it. Bam, done. And then it didn't come until more recently. I haven't got my author copy yet. I'm waiting for that moment. Tears will come. But I think it was when I saw it on the website. I was like, oh my God, this is like real. And I was like sending the link to friends. I was like, oh my God, my book is like on a website. Like, this is actually going to happen. Like, y'all can actually pre-order this thing. Like, it's really happening. So yeah, I think that was it for me. And then I'm going to have that moment again when I get the actual copy. Yeah.
And for me, I think it was exactly the opposite. I had all of these Alice in Wonderland moments where I kept forgetting the book was mine because I work with books all day long. So there was one moment several months ago where for my day job, I was looking at 3 cover proofs for my authors. So, you know, this is a meticulous process. You have to really scrutinize every detail of the copy, make sure everything's functioning, the ISBN is there, the price, the shout line, no errors, etc. So, you know, it's like, okay, I've got 4 of these actually to do, and I've got 1 hour. So I've got to like really focus and not lose my focus and put on sort of that meticulous eye that an editor has to use for a short period of time. So I did 1, great, send, press send, do 2, 3, 4, done, phew. An hour's gone by. Only after I pressed send on the 4th did I realize the 4th one was my book.
Oh, wow.
I'm fine. Just totally fine. No problems here. But that is how ingrained it is for me to be on the other side.
Wow.
Yep.
So I've had all of these moments of like, you know that feeling when you're in a dream and you're like, no, wait, this isn't supposed to be happening to me. I have those moments all throughout this process where I feel like I'm supposed to be where Moriah is. I'm supposed to be on the other side of this. And I have to remind myself, no, you've switched roles. You were the writer. You are the author now.
That like is so funny to me, because I started as a writer and then became an editor, like through a very weird series of events. And so I, as I mentioned, I think in our first episode of this podcast, I was talking to the other editors and I said, like, I don't know about you guys, but I have like two brains. I have my writer brain and I have my editor brain. And like, I have to manually turn one off to access the other because otherwise it's just like I cannot write from an editor's brain or else I will never get anything done. And it is interesting to hear how everybody's process is a little bit different that way. But switching gears just a little bit, so I want to talk about how you go about balancing your time now, because, you've got writing, you've got work, you've got family. Is there any kind of tips or tricks that you've picked up that have made things a little bit easier for you?
Workaholism helps me a lot. It's fantastic. I don't have any tips or tricks. I have zero tips or tricks. Other than the very mundane and obvious ones, which so many writers know, which is, that liminal space of the morning is such a fertile time to write because there are aspects of your, reality brain that are still kind of asleep. And I always found those hours before the phone is ringing, before everyone's awake, just very profitable writing time. So I guess that's really my only tip. Other than that, just try and get through. Try to get through that very difficult process of being a writer and a something else at the same time, which just means a lot of dedication to work life. But I also feel like if you love your work, then it doesn't feel like it's a chore. It feels like it's a joy. The only thing I can do, the only thing I've ever been good at is telling stories and helping other people tell stories. So for me, the yin yang of the writer's life and the editorial life are just two sides of the same coin.
So when I wrote A Brush with Love, I was writing it in the back of lecture halls and during endo lectures and classes and things like that. And I was having really bad insomnia at the time too. So I would wake up at 2 a.m. and I would just be like, okay, well, I can't sleep. I guess I'm just going to write. And a lot of it was born that way. And, the other big thing too is I tend to write out of order. So I write whatever feels, whatever idea or scene or even just line of dialogue feels really juicy and yummy and fun. I let my brain latch onto that and just see how far it will take it, instead of trying to follow, just this very linear process of telling the story and stuff, because I personally find that it's easier for me to write a middle if I already have the ending done, because I'm okay, I know where I'm going. I have the destination in mind already. I've tried to develop a little more balance. And things have been different. I have more time now than I did those first couple years. And so, I try to dedicate a couple hours when I get home from work and seeing patients and stuff to just frolic and play with words, because it's so fun to engage that creative aspect, especially when you're having to do really analytical problem solving all day. But yeah, I don't know, I don't have very great balance, so I'm trying, but if anybody does, I'm definitely wanting some tips.
Ditto, Maisie. Let's go find those people.
Truly, workaholic indeed. Yeah, you and me both, Nita.
balance, I think, is something I've been exploring even more so in the last 2 years. Um, working in higher education, my job in the past required me to be just fully present all the time, like with, the students, programming, all that good stuff, events. And so having now the option to work from home has like shook my world in the most beautiful of ways. When I work from home, I'll eat for 30 minutes and I'll take a nap for 30 minutes. And it's woo, yes, wonderful. Never been able to do that before, but you best believe I'm doing it now. And so I think for me, if there were tips in terms of writing and balancing it all, one would be to not rush the process. Obviously, we all have deadlines, right? It's important to have a deadline. If you're writing, you don't have a deadline, make that for yourself. But simultaneously, don't rush the process. I think it's just important to enjoy it, right? And if there is a moment where you're like, this does not feel good, you probably need to take a pause, go do something that makes you feel good, whether that's taking a nap, drinking some tea, going for a walk, whatever you need to do to like be in your body. I think it's important. So in those moments where I felt when I was like fully present in the moment, that's when I was able to really just knock out a bunch of chapters. The second thing would be to carve out intentional time. So like I am the kind of person who's like, I want to be spontaneous. I'm going to carve out 2 hours in my day to be spontaneous. That's like, that's like how I am, y'all. I live my life like on Google. Google Calendar is like my life. And so even if it's just, whether that's in the morning or sparingly throughout the day or at night, I think if you dedicate an hour or two to just writing, whether that's you just sitting there and just looking at a blank screen for a little bit, and I think it's important for that. And then for two, and I think it depends on what kind of book you're writing, but with the book I was writing, with You Grow Girl, I was able to make it collaborative. So if you are able to bring some other folks, I was able to bring my photographer into it, who's a good friend of mine. My editor and me would go back and forth, and I'm like, girl, I don't know what I'm doing. Did this sound right? What's good? All right, great. My agent, love Cindy. Love Cindy. Call her, be like, Cindy, girl, I don't know if I can do this. And Cindy give me that little pep talk, right? So, as much as self-care is important, I think community care is also, because sometimes we can't water ourselves, right? So I think we have to look for those folks to feed us the energy that we need. So don't feel like you have to do it alone. Yeah, and with those tips, I think it helps find a balance in managing your day-to-day, and then, going to whatever you use to write and, releasing your magic into the world.
I love that. So for our very last question today, what is your best writing and publishing advice that we haven't discussed yet today?
I can give mine very simply and easily. It is read. Read. Read voraciously. Read what you write and read outside what you write. Try to dissect books and understand what makes them tick. Learn from all of the other incredible writers out there how to do this mad thing that we are all pursuing. And there are teachers everywhere, and those teachers are on the pages.
Yeah, honestly, I would have to agree. I'll try to think of something different, but I would have to agree with that. Like reading it within your genre, and then just playing with other things is so crucial to like just staying in love too with writing and books, because we all love books, and so it's important to like maintain that love and cultivate it.
So in the line, because I definitely think reading, I love that, Nita. Read voraciously. I'm gonna use that one. Love that. But simultaneously, I would say do not be afraid to try things that have not been done before. While, there are amazing works out there that can inspire, don't let it be, make your own pathway, right? Even if you don't know what that pathway is, I mean, there are many different things in life where you have to build and move through the world as you're building your pathway. And so I think that's the same thing with writing. And so I think that's what I try to do with my book is like, what haven't I seen before? How can I make this a little different? How can I put my own spin on it? So for the folks listening, what's your spin, right? What's something about you that you love and cherish that you can put into your pages that will be uniquely you?
Well, this has been really, really fun. Thank you all again for stopping by to chat about your experiences. And listeners, don't forget to check out The Maid, You Grow Girl, and A Brush with Love. Details for how you can get your hands on these amazing books will be in the show notes. Thanks. Bye, everybody.
For this episode's writing prompt, write a scene in which one of your characters has to make a debut. Maybe it's their first day at a new job, or they're making a pitch to a potential new client, or their creative work is being seen in public for the very first time, like a book release, or the opening night of their play, or an art exhibit. In true writerly fashion, make it hard on them. What could possibly go wrong? Thanks for listening to Writer's Digest Presents. Join us in April when we'll be back talking about National Poetry Month and WD's Poem a Day Challenge. Until then, you can find book recommendations from the WD staff at bookshop.org/shop/Writer's Digest. And visit writersdigest.com for more writing prompts, advice, inspiration, and debut author spotlights. Email us at writers.digest@aimmedia.com to share your feedback. We look forward to hearing from you.